All right, friends, welcome back. So we were discussing the use of a hundredths grid to represent percent, and we were talking about how each square in the grid represents 1/100th. So here we have 7/10ths of the grid shaded, which is equivalent to 70 hundredths. So in this instance, we would say that 70% of the grid was shaded. All right, the second visual representation we're going to talk about for percent is the use of number lines. Okay, so when we're using number lines, we're going to look first at our top number line, where each interval represents 1, right? We start at 0 on the left-hand side and we go up to 10, and each interval represents 1. So by the time we get to our red number 7, we've covered 7 intervals, or 70% of the number line. When we look at our second number line, it's the same size as the first number line, but each interval now represents 10. So when we get to our 7th interval, we've covered a distance of 70, since each interval is 10 times the value, but we're still at 70% of the number line because it's 70 out of 100. So this is basically just showing on number lines that 7 over 10 equals 70 over 100, which then, of course, equals 70%. All right. The third way we're going to talk about representing our percent, is by using equivalent fractions. All right, so this is, I would say, probably the most common method you're going to use moving forward to calculate percent is you're going to make equivalent fractions. So 7 over 10, you can see here, this is the fraction that we start with. 7 out of 10 people prefer bright white toothpaste, right? And we multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 10, which is equivalent to 70 over 100. 70 over 100 equals 70%. And if you did this out as a division problem, 70 divided by 100, or 7 divided by 10, because these are both equivalent, right? We would get 0.7, which is equivalent to 70%, right? 70 hundredths, 70%. Okay, so that's the end of example 1. If you want to use the triad at the bottom of the page, pause the video now. So pause the video, do the triad at the bottom of the page, and then come back for the answers. All right, hopefully you had a chance to try the try it at the bottom of the page. It asks us first, Jane won 9 out of 10 video games. What percent did she win? 9 over 10 equals 90 over 100 equals 90%. And when using an equivalent fraction to find a percent, why do you write 100 as the denominator? We write 100 as the denominator because a percent is a rate in which the second term is always 100. Okay, so we're going to move on to example number 2, which for you is going to be on page 337. So if you're using your workbook, which you should be, you're going to turn to page 337. All right, so it's going to look like this. So here again, we have 2 line segments. One is 2 inches long. The second one is 4 inches long. And the tough thing about these 2 line segments they're different size line segments, but the total of each line segment equals 100%. So the way I like to think about this is, even though right now there are 3 people in my house, that's 100% of the people in my house equals 3 people right now. There might be 4 or 5 or 6 people in your house, and that equals 100% of the people in your house. So even though we have different numbers of people in our houses, the total represents 100%. Okay, so even though this line segment is 2 inches long, this represents 100% of 2 inches. Even though this line segment is double the size, this 4 inches here represents 100% of this line segment. Okay, so they're asking what is represented by point A here. So point A is right in the middle. It's half of this line segment, so it's going to be 50%, right? Point B here is 1/4 of this line segment. There are 4 intervals. So this is going to represent 25% of this line segment, right? So this would be 25%, 50%, 75%, and then 100%. Each interval represents 25% since it's broken into fourths. Okay, let's move on to example number 3. So I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Here we have example number 3. So it's asking us about using line segment CD to figure out the length of this total blue line segment. So the question says, if line segment CD represents 10%, what is the length of a line segment that is 100%? So 10% is 1/10 of 100. So we're going to multiply this green line segment by 10 in order to get to 10 tenths, right? 10 tenths equals 100%. 10 over 10 equals 100 over 100, so that would equal 1. I'm not going to drag these all the way out. 4 times 10 equals 40. All right, so if the first green line segment is 4 inches, the blue line segment would be 40 inches, which we could divide that into feet. So that would be 40 divided by 12 would be 3 with a remainder of 4. So we'd have 3 feet and 4 inches. Okay. So the second part asks us if EF, which is our second line segment here, I'm going to move on to our next slide. If EF equals 6 inches and it's 200%, what's 100%? It would be half of that. So half of 6 would be 3. So 100% of EF would be 3 inches. Okay. And I know it's tricky to think about greater than 100%, but think about 200% as just being 200 over 100. We can reduce that to 2 over 1, which equals the whole number 2, right? So it just means twice as much as 100%. It's like 2 wholes. All right, so why don't we move on from page 337? We're going to move on to page 338, which is the first page of your classwork. So I'm going to have you guys pause the video here, okay? You're going to do page 338 on your own. I'm going to pull up the answers on the screen when you press the play button again, and so you can make corrections. All right, so I'm going to pause here. You're going to do page 338 on your own, and then come back to the video when you're ready for the answers. All right, so I have posted the answers to page 338 on the screen. So the first question asks us, how can we represent a rate with 100 as a whole? And a sample answer is, we would use percent. So percent is a rate, percent is the number of hundredths that represents the part of the whole. So when writing a percent as a fraction, what is the denominator? 100. Okay, why are fifths, tenths, fourths, and halves easy to represent as percents or express as percents? And it's because these numbers are all factors of 100. So we can pretty easily say that a tenth is 10%, a fifth is 20%, a fourth is 25%, and a half is 50%. And those are kind of benchmark percents that you guys are going to become really comfortable with. So why is the grid in example 1 a good way to represent a percent? Because it's divided into hundredths. So anytime you have something that's divided into 100 pieces, it really lends itself to representing percent because each percent is 1/100th. Okay, so in number 5, it says if line segment CD in example 3 represents 100%, is the length of a line segment that is 300% longer or shorter, it's going to be longer, right? So anything over 100% means greater than 1 whole. So 300% would be like 3 wholes. 300 over 100 equals 3 over 1, which equals 3. So in each of these cases, we're being asked to use the diagram. So here there are 10 triangles in this circle, if you will. There are 10 slices of this pie, and 4 are highlighted. So that's 4 out of 10, which equals 40 over 100. In number 7, you have a hundredths grid in which 7 squares are shaded. So 7 hundredths, 7 over 100 equals 7%. In 8 through 10, you're being asked, how do we get from 1 over 5 to something over 100? So to get from 5 to 100, we multiply by 20. So we're going to multiply both the denominator and the numerator by 20, which is going to get us 20 over 100, which equals 20%. We're going to do the same thing in all these cases. We're just using different numbers to get to 100. So 10 times what equals 100? 10 times 10 equals 100. 3 times 10 equals 30, 30%, right? 11 times 5 equals 55 over 100 equals 55%. Okay, so find the percent of the line segment that point D represents in example 2. They're asking us to go back to the last page, I believe. And if you reference that, you're going to find that it's 75%. So we talked about how each one of those intervals represented 25%. Point D is the third point, so 25, 50, 75, 75%. Okay. All right, so what I'm going to have you guys do now, I'm going to give you a bit of a choice. Okay, so you have the option of either saying, you know what, I totally understand this. I'm going to move on to the online practice, which is also your homework. Okay, or, you know what, I'm still having a little bit of trouble. I'd like some more practice. I'm going to do page 339. So if you want to go ahead and do page 339, which is the next page of classwork in your book, I'm going to post the answers for that here online in this video. If you'd like to stop here and move on to the Excel practice that I've assigned through your Google Classroom, you can do that now. Finish that up. That will be your homework. I will get your scores automatically. I will see that you've completed it automatically, and that will be that. If you choose to do the extra practice, you're still responsible for the homework. Okay? So it's really up to you. I'm going to let you pause the video now and decide whether you want to go on to the Excel practice or you want to do the extra practice in the book. Okay, so you can pause the video. If you're going to do the extra practice in the book, I'm going to post the answers here in a second. Okay? All right, so if you chose to do the extra practice in the book, this was page 339. Number 12 asked you to shade each model to represent the percent. So 14% of a hundredths grid, you're going to shade 14 hundredths, right? Seems reasonable enough. So you're going to shade 14 squares. Now number 13 is a little bit trickier. It gives you 5 separate squares, and it asks you to shade 20%. Now what I would do for this is I would say I know that this 1 shaded out of 5, is equivalent to 1/5. 1 over 5 equals 20 over 100, right? 1 over 5, I'm going to multiply 5 by 20 to get to 100. I'm going to multiply 1 by 20 to get to 100. So this equals 20%. 1/5 equals 20%. And that's also a benchmark percent that you'll get to know really, really well. Okay, so 14 and 15, we're using line segment AB. When we have these 2 capital letters with the line over the top, that means line segment AB. So a line that ends in points A and B. Okay, so line segment AB we're told is 3 inches long. If line segment AB represents 50%, what is the length of a line segment that's 100%? So it's going to be twice as long. AB is 50%, so AB to AB would be 100%, and that's going to be 6 inches, double 3 inches, so 3 times 2 equals 6. If line segment AB is 300%, what is the length of a line segment that is 100%? So now it's saying AB is no longer 50%. Now AB is 300%. It's 3 holes. So if this is 300%, what's 300% divided by 3? It's going to be 100%. So this is 100%. It's going to be 1 inch. Okay. So your friend shows you a coin collection. It is 45/50ths of the coins. In it, 45/50ths of the coins are quarters. What percent of the coins are quarters? We're going to multiply both the numerator and the denominator by 2 to get to 100 on the denominator. So 45 times 2 is 90, 50 times 2 is 100. We'll get 90 over 100, which equals 90%. Okay, so 17 says in a race, 19 out of 50 runners finished in fewer than 30 minutes. What percent of the runners finished in fewer than 30 minutes? So here we can see we're going to go from a denominator of 50 to 100 by multiplying by 2. Multiply the numerator also by 2. We'll get 38 over 100, which equals 38%. A basketball player made 63 out of 100 attempted free throws. What percent of the free throws did that player make? That's a nice easy one. 63 over 100 equals 63%. Harry kept a weather journal. For September, the sun was shining 4 out of every 5 days. What percent of the days was the sun not shining, right? So you have to read this question carefully because they're not asking for sunny days. They're saying not shining. So 4 out of 5 days it is shining means 1 out of 5 days it's not shining. 1 over 5 equals 20 over 100, which equals 20%. Okay, so hopefully this is making some sense to you. And again, you're not doing, I know we would generally do page 340 with the assessment practice on it for homework. We're not doing that today. We're actually going to do the online practice that I'm assigning you through your Google Classroom. All right, so now you're going to go check into your Google Classroom and you're going to try lesson 6-1 Math Excel. Right, so that's your extra practice. That's your homework. I'll see you tomorrow. All right, bye guys. Thank you.